learning the approval functionality and how we can best set up some defaults. So again, it follows a distinct workflow. I'm going to kind of go through kind of from left to right, things that do need approval. I'll also point out things that don't. And then how can we set up some defaults in the system? Some of it will be set up on the employee record. Some of it will be set up in transaction preferences. So again, I'll just demonstrate where can we set these items up. So again, it can flow to the right people when it comes to approval. Okay. Now, the first one we're going to start with is I'm going to go to everyone. This is the most common one, is really the timesheet. Okay. So where does the timesheet approval come from? This is pretty flat, right? It's only one person. If I go to the employee record, on that employee record, I'm going to say, who is my time approver? Okay, there's only one. When I submit it for approval, it will go to that person. It'll show up in their bell, right? And they'll see timesheets to approve, right? And then they can go ahead and review the time entries and approve it. We think that that's more for a managerial point of view, or that person's manager to say, did they account for their 40 hours? As far as on the project point of view, each account manager would see on a given project, as you know, in the budget screen, I can see exactly who put time towards my project. If any of it's wrong, I'm either transferring it or I'm talking to that person to say, hey, why'd you put time against my project? So again, that's what we do for timesheet approval. Okay. The next one, as I come again, sorry, to another spot, we have the expense reports. That same type of idea. Again, usually this is a single person. Who does this charge to? And again, this goes to the employee record. And we're going to again say, who is my expense report approver? So when I submit it for approval, that usually goes to my manager. And again, that person is reviewing it. Is this okay? If it's hitting projects, again, the project manager or account manager on that project would have questions about it hitting their budget. That's where they would see it. But as far as the overall, here's the expense, right? Who's approving it and saying, yes, that looks legitimate, go ahead and approve it. And then I can do other things to process that through and reimburse that employee, okay? The credit card approver kind of falls into that same thing. We'll get to that in expenses, okay? All right, so the next place we come into, and again, that's more from time entry as well. Again, I have my assignments, that's things we were not going to touch any of that. There's really no approval process in that. Okay. The sales process. Okay. The sales process really doesn't have much. Again, if I create an opportunity, on that opportunity, I may have an estimate. And so we'll see about the project estimate when in regards to that part. Okay. But again, not really anything in the salesperson has some sort of approval process, okay? The next thing we're going to go into is, again, obviously project manager. And let's just go into a particular project and where are some things that we can set up that would need approval, okay? So I'm just going to grab a particular project. So here I am in this one project. And number one is the estimate, okay? The estimate, when I'm creating this, of course, by default, usually it is the person that is set up as the account manager on the project, okay? We do have a transaction preference that could be involved, okay? So I came into here and I come into transaction preferences, but sorry, the navigation to this is Workamajig, admin manager, system setup, and transaction preferences. Okay, account information, transaction preferences. If you're not seeing this, and of course it might show up like this, we just say show advanced options, and that gives me this more breakout, okay? When I come to the estimates, it's saying, who's can be an approver, allow only one approved estimate. So these are kind of controls for how many estimates I can have in. Or right here, I can set up who is my default approver. So we have the person entering it. So if I create it, I'm the approver, so I can immediately approve it. But I can also have the AE on the project. And if you're using project manager, I could have the project manager. Or if I want it specifically going to an assigned person, I can say person entered below and go ahead and pick that person out of my staff list, right? So I'm picking a name out of here, and then they would be the ones that would be set on any estimate that is created in the system as the approver, okay? Now, again, most typical that I see, it's usually the AE on the project, and they often are the ones that are creating it, but sometimes there's a difference. Or again, if you have a PM in there. So again, it's just looking to that project to define who that is, okay? Now, when we actually go to the estimate, okay, now again, that's what defaulted in. So I open up the estimate, and under estimate settings, I'm able to pick, I can see who is my internal approver, okay? This is the account manager, so I'm an artist is my account manager. But even with this, it defaulted in with that setting. I can still go ahead and say, no, I actually want this one to go to somebody else. So again, whoever's in my list of staff, I can pick that staff member. And so when I do that, instead of having, again, that's the bad name, but once I get it and I changed it away from my name, I can actually submit it for approval. So again, defaulted in, but we're still allowing you to change that based upon that particular project or your needs on that project or your organization, okay? Now, again, even after I've submitted this, just let you know, so I submit this one for approval, and that doesn't prevent me from actually kind of switching it as well. So just let you know that I can now come into this estimate, and even though it's been sent off to somebody else to do the approval, I can come into the estimate settings and I can still switch it back, right? Or switch it to somebody else and save that. And now it removed it from that person's and now sitting in my box in order to approve it. So I'm going to have that estimate sitting here for me to do it. Although again, I have the submit. So again, that's kind of the thing that we're allowing you to do. Once it's submitted, I'm able to then play with it, even with that. So in case somebody's out of the office, okay? Make sense? All right. Now we do have some other transactions that happen on the project, and we can kind of go through those approval processes. So miscellaneous costs, as you know, these do not have any approval. These are things that you tend to have bought in bulk. So as a project manager or account manager, I'm able to just put this in as a transaction on this project. There is no approval process for this. It's just on there and billable unless I say otherwise, okay? I may have purchase orders or orders of some sort. So how do I deal with orders? Now I can create the orders, but again, the approval process is actually based upon the employee record, okay? So if I go back to that employee record, okay, and I'm an artist, again, we set up under accounting, down below here, we have order limits. So as I create an order, I'm allowed to approve orders up to a certain limit. So for each employee that needs to be approving orders, you can set this up. And we do split it out, purchase orders versus insertion versus broadcast orders. But again, if I'm unable to approve it, then it's going to go to anybody else that is able to approve, right? And that would mean that they have a limit that's above what it is. So for example, in this employee, they have an order limit of $100. So if the order is for $100, I can approve it. If it's for $100 and a penny, that person can no longer approve it. They will get a submit button. And then that would allow the next person to go ahead and that next level of people that are able to approve above that amount, it would go to their bell to say, hey, there's a purchase order ready for billing or ready for approval. Sorry about that. Okay. Right. Now, there is a tweak that we have in this, just to let you know. Okay. So if I come into purchase orders, okay, we do have the setting, and this goes for all the orders actually, even though we have it under purchases. And it says assign an approver with the lowest limit. So this one actually restricts who that next level is. So if I can't approve it, who does it send to? Okay, so I may have it leveled out where I have a level at $1,000, I have a level at $10,000, 100,000, right? Whatever those levels are. And so if I check this, right, then what that does is, it's for $150. Okay, anybody who's like the next level, so anybody that, for example, has $1,000 and below, it would just send it to them. It would not send it to the people that are at 10,000, 100,000 and above. It'll just send it to that level that can approve up to $1,000. Okay. If I deselect this, then that $150 order will actually go out to anybody that can approve. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Oh, sorry. Let me some housekeeping. Sorry. If you have any questions, there is a question panel if there's anything, or you can put it into the chat. So you can kind of do it in either location. There's a question and answer section, and there's also a chat. So if you have any ongoing questions, go ahead and type those into there. Okay. All right. So again, on the order itself, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open an order based upon this. Let me just go into here and we'll just go look at one of my orders that I had up. And that was, I had a PO in here. Okay. Let's see if I had a purchase order on this one. Sorry, I did not. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and create a purchase order just so we can kind of see this and how we can manipulate it as well. Don't worry too much about, I'm picking a vendor or whatnot and an item. I'm just quickly coming through this. That doesn't matter. It's always the value that it's there. Okay. And I'm just going to put in, $10 here and save that. Okay. So now within this order itself, again, I'm able to approve it because it's enough, right? I have 100, or this person has that value. Even with this though, I can specifically click onto the order. So at any time I have this over here on the approver, I click on that link and it's going to give me a list of people. Now, what it would do if I didn't have the limit, it's going to default into anyone approved for this limit. That's where, again, it's going to send it to everybody. But even with this, I can still specifically say, you know what, this is for this. I need to send it to, I'm an artist. That's the person who's going to be approving my stuff. And so it would approve just to them. But by default, what will happen is if I can't approve it, it's going to get auto set to anyone approved for this limit. And technically it's going to show up in all 4 of these persons' box to approve. Okay. So again, if you want the limit, kind of level it out, that's one way that I can, again, assign it to the lowest limit. So again, it reduces that list of people that are getting that out. Okay. Okay. The next one we would have is associated with that purchase order, of course, is I have a vendor invoice that goes along with that. Okay. Now, vendor invoices have the same type of thing. So if I go to vendor invoice, and again, I create it, who is going to be the approver in that? Okay. So that is actually controlled here by the transaction preferences. So if I go to, again, still the transaction preference, vendor invoice, I get the same thing, right? It's saying, who is my default approver? Okay, so it could be the person entering the invoice, if that works for your team. Or again, I can say it's the account manager that's on the project header. So when I first create a vendor invoice, it's going to, I pick a project. You saw that I didn't in my example, but I pick a project, then every line is going to be for that project. But I can create a vendor invoice that is obviously associated with other projects. But what this one is saying is the project that's in that initial one, it will go to the account manager on there. Okay. If it's not, then it's usually going to the account manager that's on kind of the vendor. This person's in charge of this company, right? But usually, again, I usually see person entering the invoice is that. The one I would not recommend this setting is automatically approved. That's a real tough one because if I create it, I'm creating that vendor invoice and I hit save, it's approved, right? And usually I have to still do some work on it. So to me, that seems a little harsh. So I usually don't say do automatically approve. Usually it's the person entering the invoice, or I have a specific person. Everything goes to this particular one. Okay. That makes sense? All right. Now I did have a question, kind of a side question saying, if an order sends an invoice for services, right? So I take this would be a freelancer. Should I have a purchase order there? Should I have a purchase order with a vendor invoice? And I would say yes, because again, the person that's filling in or creating that vendor invoice doesn't know where it goes, right? But if I have an order number that's associated with it, the vendor gives me that, then I can immediately connect that vendor invoice to that order so that it will track to the right project or right location. So yes, that's a given, right? Always have an order for anything external. It also allows you to see that budget versus actual, right? It already is accounting for that expense. So you know you're not busting the budget on that particular thing. Okay. All right. So kind of back to approval. So that's my vendor invoices, right? There is no setting on an employee for that again, other than if I'm the person entered below, or again, I'm the person that's entering it. And again, being able to enter it is obviously security rights, so we're not really talking about that. Okay. Now on an expense report, there is that convert it to a vendor invoice so that I can pay it. That is, again, becomes a vendor invoice at that point in time. And so again, we have these same settings that the vendor invoice keys into that as to who is that approver, right? So if I have an expense report, I convert that into a vendor invoice in order to pay my staff for that, or my person for that. That will automatically be sent to whoever the vendor invoice approver is that you have designated. But once again, as you know, I can come into that and I can make the changes on this. So again, it defaults in with a particular approver, right? But I'm always able to say this particular vendor invoice, I actually need it to go to somebody else. Okay. And then that would be sitting in their bell to approve. So again, we're setting a default. How does it come in? But obviously in the heat of the moment, right, shall we say, that vendor invoice is going to be available to go ahead and forward it off to somebody else. Okay. All right. That is kind of like the expense side of things. Are there any questions revolving around that? How can I get those things set up? For the most part, these typical kind of expensy things, which are being time, expenses, credit card, right? If I create a credit card charge, if I have a vendor invoice, again, those are kind of controlled. There's usually only one person set as a default. But although I can change some things, usually time approver and expense report approver are not changeable. Okay. So the next thing we would be looking at, now that we have that order, we have the, within a project, as you know, we do have deliverables, okay? Deliverable is just a way of sending out a particular item for approval, right? For a picture file, a PDF. Here. Sorry. Well, I get it to the right one. Okay. And I'll go ahead and save this one. Okay. So when I'm creating a review round, okay, we have a number of things that can come in. So again, we're using either an internal review or a client review. And it's like, how can we get these to kind of be a little more automatic? So when I create something for this project, right, how do I get it that, an internal reviewer, right, it's going to always be these people, right? So there are defaults that we can set into the system, okay? If I come into the transaction preferences and I look at deliverables, so back to transaction preferences, for the most part, I'm just saying these are who's there. Now we do have a more advanced one where we have deliverable types, but again, I'm not going to discuss those, but in that one, you can actually set up a specific people. But in general, just this normal kind of vanilla flavored deliverable, there's really, the setup here is not for that. It's actually on the employee record. So we can, on the employee record, under projects and time, we can say, hey, if here I have, deliverable, anytime a deliverable is created for a project that I'm on, make me a reviewer or put me in as a notify. Okay. So these are default. So when I do create that particular one, if that's defaulted in, that would come to that project. Okay. So let me open that project again, just so we can show that. And I go to the project team. This will default in up here above, and we see subscriptions. So again, I open the project. I went to the team up in the top right corner is subscriptions. And so each one would default in from what's on their employee record. So again, under deliverable, it's like, I want the, I'm an artist. Anytime I create a deliverable, I'm an artist will be an approver. Platinum trainer is going to be an approver, and these other people may be notify, or everybody's a notify type of idea. Okay. This would default in again from their employee record. Even here, I can make a decision to say, nope, I don't want you, right? So again, I don't need you to default it in. I will decide that when I create those. Okay. But even if I leave this, okay, I come into the deliverable itself. And again, I'm sorry, I didn't have the default set up, but let's just pretend, sorry, that based upon the employee record settings, this deliverable was created and I got these two people as approvers. Even with this one, I can make a decision and say, hey, take this person off, right? I don't need, I'm an artist on this particular one. So again, we have this default that comes in from the employee record that defaults into the project itself. And even then, when I actually create the transaction, I'm going to be able to adjust it accordingly. Okay. Does that make sense? All right. So the next thing we have, so that's really the project one. That's really the most of the approval processes that we would have in place. We do have a couple of new things that we have added in. And I, again, not knowing if you have added these in as part of your process, but if we go under tracking, we have project request forms. And again, project request forms are more, I need a project. These are really set up here where you're saying in those project requests, I need a new project, whatever that is. And you're setting up what is the approval process. So right here in the approval process, you're already predefining who that is. There is a way while it's in the middle that I can add or remove people from the workflow from there. But again, that's the nature of that one. The project change request is within a project. I need to update either the specs, usually that's the spec sheets. And so again, this one is also available to where I define what the approval process is. And depending on how you approve it, once I generate it, I may be able to add or remove people from the workflow. But again, these are a couple of other things related to projects that may have an approval process set up. Again, defaulted in. When I actually get it, then I'm able to change it. Okay. All right. So the next thing usually that involves billing, involves billing. Okay. Now, so just coming into billing. Okay. What is it in billing that we can set up as defaults? Okay. Now, for the most part, this is going to look at transaction preferences. Okay. So when I'm generating an invoice, again, I'm going to be able to set these defaults. So again, I'm back to transaction preferences, client invoices, and I get this, who is going to be my approver? Okay. So if I create an invoice and submit it for approval, who is it? And that is usually going to be person entering that invoice. Is it the AE on the project, right? Or is it a specific person that you enter below? And again, just like vendor invoice automatically approved, don't really recommend that one because again, I type in the information and save and it's immediately approved. So I don't have maybe anything that's there for me to approve. I have to unapprove it and edit it. So again, it's there, but most commonly I'm going to see person entering or AE on the project. Okay. So again, that defaults in, right? So once that's done, right, once I have that invoice generated, and I think I have some invoices here. Oh, that's my worksheet. Okay, thought I had an invoice here. I could just quickly grab one. So if I go into my client invoices, I'll just quickly grab one of these, show you what I can do. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I know this is posted, so I'm just going to unpost it and unapprove it just so we can kind of see what it's doing. Okay. Okay, I have advanced bills. But even with this one, again, we're going to have an approver down below. Let me see if I can get one that's unapproved. Sorry, not sent for approval. That'd probably be a good one. Okay, so even with this, again, it defaults in a certain approver, and I'm still going to be able to select somebody specific if need be. Okay, and I can even route this. If this was sent to me for approval, and then I get it in my bell, I can always open it up and I say, I've looked at it. I agree with it. So now I need to send it off to Brad. So now Brad's got it. And so once I save this, really, it's sitting in Brad's box to do it. That's if it's already been submitted. If it hasn't been submitted, I would submit it. Now it will go directly to Brad. So again, this is a way for you to kind of pass invoices from one person to another if need be. Okay, not common, but again, it usually goes to the account manager. That's the most common. But if that account manager needs to give it to their boss, then that's the way that they could do it, is just switch their name into whoever it would be. Okay. Now, when it comes to generating the invoice, this is just like I generated one invoice, right? What I want to look at more though is if you're doing the billing worksheets. This is the most common. How do I get this workflow in? Okay. I need more than one person to kind of see it. Okay. So I'm going to come in as an employee. So I think we know how to generate billing worksheets. That's no problem. But how do I kind of get in? So by default, a billing worksheet is always going to go to, when it's being generated, sorry, I should maybe step back a little bit. When I come into billing and I generate billing worksheets, I'm going to have a chance to set who is going to be the approver. So is it the account manager on the project, or is it the project manager on the project that should see this? Okay. And again, if you don't have project manager turned on, you don't see this. But again, approver is account manager or project manager. That's who it's sent to. Okay. So the initial one, when I generated, it's going to be worksheets in review, that came to that account manager in that project. And so here it is sitting in their bell. Now, I know there are certain workflows revolved around this, and we have discussed this before in the billing worksheet webinar. I just wanted to quickly show you that we can adjust these things. So again, it was sent to me, but I need somebody else to kind of look at this after I'm done with it and without doing much, right? So I take it, that's fine, it came to me, but now I need to give it to my manager. So they can just simply click on the more worksheet settings. And right here, it's going to say, who is the approver? So once again, I can just simply pick the person I need to send it to, save it. And actually, I don't have to do anything else. As soon as I hit, as soon as I save and close this, it actually is now in that person's bell. It's already been submitted for approval. And then whatever rights they have, it would be there. Okay. Now, this person has the right to create client invoices. That's why there's an approve. If they did not have that right, this would say submit. And I think you guys all know about that part. But again, that's the idea, is that, again, I can then adjust this. As soon as I save, this is now on Don Draper's bell, that Don can open it up and again, make that change. The other ones that we see is that, okay, it's sent to my account manager. That manager has taken a look and they don't have the right. And they would just simply say, yes, it's been approved from mine. That would actually now come into the billing worksheet area. And there may be a workflow where you're saying, okay, you look at worksheets that have been approved, but not generated invoices. Okay. So let's say this is approved. And so I have some manager that is going to come in, and let me just refresh this. That manager is going to look for things that have been approved, right? Or submitted for approval. then they approve. Then the final billing person would still have that right to come in and ready to create invoices. This is kind of the final stop. So even here, that last person is going to be able to review these worksheets. So again, I turned it in from send it to the account manager and it comes back to billing to create invoices. I can actually slot out different people in there using the system to say either I'm specifically putting you as in the approver, or you're looking at worksheets in a certain status. And then me as the person creating the invoices, I'm just simply looking for ones that say ready to create invoices. That's the one I create invoices for. Okay. Right. Client invoices, we kind of went through that a little bit. Again, we have all of these invoices for the billing person is going to be sitting here. So I can always see where my invoices are once they've been generated. And again, waiting to be submitted. That means they were generated. I might not have had who's the approver on here, or I created them without submitting them. And so again, this is going to give you a quick way to go ahead and submit those, or again, jump into it and make the change here. Okay. So this has been submitted, but again, I can set up who was the approver on this, right? Should be in there. Right. It's already gone. So again, just basically allowing me to decide who is that approver on these particular items. Okay. Again, I can always flip who that is. All right. Right. We did go through the purchasing. Again, we saw in our transaction preferences, we did have that ability under the transaction preferences, under vendor invoices, again, setting who is going to be the default approver on there. And again, those purchasing under purchasing, I can make a decision even under that to switch it to somebody else if need be. All right. Now, last is oftentimes we see in accounting, right, under today accounting, there's going to be a lot of things that come in through them, and they should be able to see a lot of the transactions. So we have unapproved transactions. Now, typically, an accountant has great control to kind of override things. So even coming into unapproved transactions, this accounting person can actually come in and make a decision, right? They can either submit it, change the approver to themselves and approve it. Okay. So we're not going to lose anything. If it's unapproved or it's been approved, but it hasn't been posted, again, I'm going to see those transactions so I can take care of them. Okay. Now, from an accounting standpoint, tend not to do AP, although we can look at that. They tend not to do AR, although they may. The transactions that most accountants are dealing with are journal entries. And in reality, those have no approval process. So when I create a journal entry, just like more of a miscellaneous cost, right? It is auto approved. We figure you have the right to create them and you're the one in charge of your general ledger. So we put no approval process as far as journal entries are concerned. Okay. And there in a nutshell is, again, how can we set up approval processes that can kind of help guide your workflow and also be flexible enough to adjust on the fly. So we saw that. So number one, and again, is going into the employee record, setting any type of default here, under the accounting, setting up approval or limits here, setting up who my approver is. Okay. Then from there, we go into the transaction preferences. And again, on estimates, who's a default approver, under expense report, saying so that's not one, sorry, under purchase order, sorry, under client invoices, same type of thing. Under vendor invoices, again, who is going to be that default approver. Under project requests and project change requests, again, those are set on the actual items themselves. Again, can be edited once they're created, but again, these are the defaults that would come through. Okay. right? Now, there is one thing I should talk about, and that is this one right here, backup approver, okay? Okay, backup approver. This one should always be blank, okay? It's designed that I am going out of the office, so I'm going to come into here and I'm going to say, while I'm out of the office, I need to have Brad take care of all of the stuff that would normally be sent to me. Brad will take over those duties. So it will go into Brad's bell. Technically, it comes into my bell as well, but it goes to Brad's bell for him to take care of. Upon my return, I go ahead and blank this out and save it. And now all of those things are back into my bell only. Okay. So in general, this backup approver is always left blank. Okay. Now, if you're saying, hey, this one's showing up in my mailbox, I'll give you some other things. So this is always showing up. First thing to look is just go to the employee record and look at that back. Again, this is my backup approver. So I'm an artist's backup approver, right? So anything that's sent to I'm an artist is going to this backup approver. Okay. So that's what you would look. Who is the normal person? Go look at what their backup approver is. And I bet you just blank it out, that would be there. Okay. We do have an odd security right that kind of puts something in for expenses. So under account information and security settings, okay, there is under, I forget where this is. Okay. Let's see. Sorry, I forgot the billing expense. Oh, there we go. This is one. So this security right here under purchasing, sorry about that. Under purchasing, we have the security right. It says approve vendor invoices on your projects. Okay. What does this do? Now it's kind of like a duplicate, right? So you have the vendor invoices sent to a distinct person, right? The AE on the project. But if I have this right, that invoice on that project where I'm on the project team, that's coming to my bell also. Okay. So that's some people check it and they don't realize what it's doing. It's basically saying, if I'm on the project team and somebody puts in a vendor invoice against that project, send it to me for approval. Okay. I don't know why we added that one in, but it's in there. And so again, that may be something that's coming into play if you're seeing that it's being sent to odd people. Okay. So this is probably the number one thing that we see. Okay. The other would be probably the most common is that backup approver. Okay. Okay. Does backup approver also work on deliverables? No, it does not. Okay. But it does work on timesheets, expense reports, vendor invoices, that type of thing. The deliverable would be, it didn't go to that person. And so you would either skip them in the deliverable or remove them from the process. Okay. And that is all I have. Is there anything that I didn't touch on, or is there any certain workflows that you would like? Again, always there's going to be, go ahead and send an email to support@workamajig.com, and you're welcome to discuss kind of your workflows with your account manager, and they'd be happy to do that. Okay. One last time. I don't know if people are typing or that's kind of it. I know it's kind of a dry subject. Sorry about that. But again, we just wanted to show you that there are ways for you to set up some defaults. So again, it can fit a certain workflow, but even with that, there's ways to adjust things for you on the fly that meet that particular project or that particular transaction need. Okay. And again, if you have any questions, any further questions, you're welcome to send a note to support@workamajig.com. I'll just give a couple more seconds here to see if anybody has other questions. If not, we can call it a day. And thank you guys very much for attending. Truly appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day.